Welcome to the hidden corners where truth and terror collide. Discover a realm where the lines between the living and the supernatural blur as you embark on a journey to the paranormal and visit the mysterious hidden corners of your mind.
Welcome to the Wolfman Chronicles. This is Chapter 11 of Book 7, which makes it Episode 88. It's in Nevada. It's a desert rescue. Last week on the Wolfman Chronicles, Tucker's dad, Roy Benton, went to the old abandoned mine to pay a visit to Luella, with romance on his mind. When he heard the boys arrive on their dirt bikes, he escaped into the back of the mine shaft where he had a hidden still, thinking he would bring back a bottle of liquor to loosen up Luella, and he'd tell the boys to get lost. But an explosion occurred deep in the dark recesses of the tunnel, sending the boys running to find Tucker's dad. Meanwhile, Jack arrives and helps Luella to escape. As he's getting Lou back to his vehicle, he hears the explosion and he sees flames escaping through the mine door. He tells Lou to wait at the car, and he races back to the mine to see if he can save the boys. The air was thick with heat and ash. Jack's lungs burned as he pushed deeper into the collapsed shaft, the scent of scorched earth and creosote clinging to his nostrils. His boots crunched over broken glass, snapped boards, and the remnants of someone's cooler. Those melted plastic still oozing like a wound. "Help!" a voice called faintly, high-pitched and panicked. Must have been one of the boys. "Keep yelling," Jack shouted. "I'm coming." He shoved aside another beam, his hands slick with blood and sweat. Rocks tumbled. The shaft groaned above him like some ancient beast awakening. Jack paused just long enough to gauge the risk, then pressed forward, crawling on his elbows, into the narrow space where the ceiling had dropped to less than 4 feet. Behind him, the wind whistled through the entrance. Above ground, the fire had mostly burned itself out, but the heat was still unbearable inside. Jack squinted into the dark space ahead, where shadows shifted like living things. The voice came again, closer now, tremulous and thin. "Over here. I can't move." The beam above Jack's head groaned again. A sharp crack echoed through the shaft, followed by a rain of fine ash and grit. He covered his mouth with one arm and kept crawling, ignoring the sting in his shoulders and the growing sense of dread curling in his gut. A flashlight lay half buried in the rubble. Jack grabbed it, thumbing the switch. Miraculously, it flipped on, throwing a trembling cone of light forward. The beam caught on a tennis shoe twisted sideways beneath a sheet of paneling. "There you are," Jack breathed. Jesse, the smallest of Tucker's friends, was pinned under the collapsed ceiling, his legs trapped by a snarl of charred wood and rocks. His face was gray with soot, eyes wide with terror. "I can't move my leg," the boy said. "It's okay," Jack said, voice steady though his heart thundered. "I've got you." He slung the flashlight between his teeth and went to work, using a splintered board as leverage. The debris groaned, but didn't budge. Outside, another gust of wind howled through the shaft mouth, carrying with it the acrid scent of smoke, and a more alarming sound, a fresh crack, followed by a low, ominous rumble. The shaft was shifting again. Jack glanced up. The ceiling above him sagged another inch. Had he had minutes, maybe less. "Hey," he said to the boy, gripping his shoulder, "what's your name?" "Jesse," the boy whispered, teeth chattering despite the heat. "Okay, Jesse, listen to me. I'm going to lift this board. When I say move, I want you to crawl towards me. Can you do that?" "I think so." Jack tightened his grip on the board and shifted his weight. This time when he pressed, something gave. A loud snap as one beam split and collapsed, freeing Jesse's leg just enough. "Now, go!" Jesse scrambled forward, wailing as he dragged his one bruised and broken leg behind him. Jack helped push him out, forcing himself not to look up at the ceiling, which now creaked in protest with every movement. They made it 3 feet before the floor buckled. Jack threw himself over the boy, shielding him as chunks of rock and blackened timber dropped around him. A beam slammed into Jack's shoulder, knocking the air from his lungs. Pain flared, hot and bright. But the ceiling held. "Go," he gasped, shoving Jesse towards the opening. "Keep going. Out the door." "My friends are still in there. And Tucker's dad," he yelled. The boy hobbled towards the distant shaft mouth, dragging his broken, twisted leg. Jack pushed forward, digging deeper into the rubble, arm numb and bleeding. A sudden crash behind him turned his blood cold. The shaft entrance was collapsing. "Tucker!" Jack yelled. Further back, he heard a muffled voice yell, "Help! We're back here!" "Can you move?" Jack hollered back. "Yeah, we're in a side tunnel, but the walls caved in," came the reply. "Are you hurt?" "I think Bo's arm is broken, but that's all." "Okay, I'm going to get you out." Jack grabbed a 2x4 and started leveraging it against the rocks that blocked the shaft. It took several agonizing minutes, but Jack finally cleared enough debris to form a crawl space wide enough for the boys. He guided them through it, one by one, his ears tuned to every creak and groan of the failing shaft. Finally, the boys were free. "My dad's still down there," Tucker cried as he ran out towards the charred bikes. "We were going in after him when we heard the explosion. He's got to be further back." Just then, with a final loud crack, the last remaining beam collapsed, and a tidal wave of dust filled the air around them as the mine caved in. Jack closed his eyes and let the burning air fill his lungs. They'd made it. Oh, barely. All but Tucker's dad. Luella stumbled down the hill as the boys emerged and cried out, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, thank God you're alive. Thank God." She rushed to them and held each boy in a big embrace as the 4 boys cried and sheepishly told her how sorry they were. The wail of sirens cut through the smoke-heavy air, growing louder as flashing red and blue lights shimmered like ghosts against the blackened hillside. A fire engine, ambulance, and several sheriff's trucks rumbled to a halt near the shaft's entrance, tires crunching over the scorched gravel. Jack sat hunched near a rock, his back to the smoldering wreckage, one arm cradled tight to his side. Blood streaking his temple, and the skin of his forearms were raw, blistered in places. Beside him, Tucker coughed violently, wrapped in a fire blanket, wide eyes darting between the paramedics and the dark mouth of the collapsed shaft. Paramedics were strapping Jesse onto a gurney. A team of 3 rescuers, already prepping breathing gear and thermal imaging equipment, grabbed lights and started towards the collapsed entrance. Jack struggled to his feet. "There's a secondary crawl space, off to the left, past the breach. I saw it just before the roof came down." One of the medics stepped forward. "Well, you need to sit down, sir." "I know where he might be," Jack insisted, staggering forward a step before the medic caught him. The rescue chief hesitated, eyes flickering from Jack to the shaft. Then he turned to his crew. "You heard him. Search left. Use rope tethers and spotters. We don't know how stable it is in there." Tucker stared at the entrance, his mouth trembling. Jack placed a hand on his shoulder, ignoring the pain in his side. "They'll find him. They're not going to stop until they do." But even as the team disappeared into the smoke, the shaft groaned again, deep and angry. And the boy's voice, broken with fear, whispered, "Please, Dad, please be alive." The wind had shifted, blowing the smoke to the east, but the air still reeked of scorched wood and melted plastic. Jack sat on an overturned water cooler, his shirt ripped open at the shoulder where the medic had dressed the wound. Tucker stood a few feet away, arms wrapped tightly around his middle, eyes locked on the dark opening of the shaft. Beside him, Brian, silent and pale, rocked on the balls of his feet, flinching at every groan the mountain made. Behind them, the ambulance doors slammed shut. Jesse and Bo were inside, Jesse with a broken leg in a temporary cast, and Bo with a broken arm in a sling. The paramedics climbed into the cab, voices clipped and calm over the radio as they pulled away in a swirl of dust and gravel. Then came the heavy tread of boots. Sheriff Bill Mason, broad-shouldered and grim-faced, walked over to where the boys were sitting. His uniform was smudged with soot, hat low over his brow, badge dulled by age and ash. He glanced once at the shaft entrance, and then at the boys. "Boys," he said, giving a curt nod, "mind telling me what just happened out here?" Tucker swallowed hard and nodded. "Name?" Tucker Benton," Mason scribbled in a small notebook. "Roy Benton your dad?" "Yes, sir. He was trying to find me. We got separated after the fire started." Mason turned over to Brian. "And you?" Brian opened his mouth, then closed it. Jack gave him a look, steady, reassuring. Luella stepped forward and stood between the boys and the sheriff. The boys and their dad were just exploring the old shaft. "I think one of them might have brought some fireworks. Might have been what set off that fire," Luella said, giving the boys a quick glance. Sheriff Mason raised a brow. "Is that true, boys?" Brian nodded miserably. The sheriff sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Now this place has been condemned for 10 years. Signs all over the damn perimeter. You boys see 'em?" No one answered. "I'll take that as a yes," he muttered, writing down again. "You're lucky we're not pulling bodies out. Lucky this nice man went in after you." The sheriff gave Jack a good long stare down. "And I suppose you two were just driving past and happened to see the explosion?" "Well, that's about right," Jack commented, his voice low and controlled. "Look, Sheriff, the boys knew it was reckless, but right now the kid's dad is still in there. Can we save the lectures and questions until he's out?" Mason looked at Jack for a long moment, then gave a single nod and stepped back. "Rescue team says they hit a second collapse. They're trying to clear it now. Might be another 30 minutes, maybe more." Tucker sat down hard in the dirt, pulling his knees to his chest. Brian crouched beside him, eyes distant. Jack stayed on his feet, gaze fixed on the mouth of the mine, listening for any shouts or any signals. Minutes crawled by, each one stretched thin with the weight of silence. As the sheriff walked away, the gravel crunching beneath his boots, Luella gave the boys a stern look, arms crossed tight over her chest. The floodlights made her hair look like pure molten silver. She looked at the boys, her mouth in a tight line. "We'll talk about what really happened later," she said, voice low but cutting. Don't think for 1 second that you're off the hook." Tucker shifted under her gaze, staring down at his shoes. Brian mumbled something that sounded like, "Yes, ma'am." "But for right now," she continued, her tone softening just slightly, "we've got other matters that are more important, like finding your dad." The weight of her words settled over them. Tucker blinked hard and nodded, still not looking up. Brian sat cross-legged in the dirt, picking at the charred edges of his sleeve. Behind them, a static-filled voice cackled over the rescue team's comms. Everyone turned as one of the men at the shaft entrance raised a hand to his earpiece. "We've got something," he shouted. "It looks like we found him." Tucker sprang to his feet, eyes wide. Luella caught him by the shoulders before he could bolt forward. "Easy. Don't run in. Let them do their work." Oh, Jack stood also, the pain in his shoulder forgotten. The rescue crew reappeared a moment later, emerging from the mine with soot-covered faces and shaking their heads. Then, from the shadows behind them, a stretcher was carried out. Roy Benton lay atop it, alive, coughing weakly, his shirt scorched and his face blackened with smoke, but breathing. Tucker broke free and rushed to him. "Dad! Dad!" Roy turned his head, his hand lifting just enough to squeeze his son's fingers. "Hey, Tucker," he rasped. Tears filled his eyes. Luella's expression finally cracked, relief washing over her stern features. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, muttering, "Damn fool," though her voice caught on the last word. Now the days that followed moved in a strange blur of paperwork, hospital visits, and a really uneasy silence. The mine fire had made the local news, twice. Once for the dramatic rescue of the boys and Roy Benton, and again when investigators confirmed that the blaze had been started by an illegal still deep in the mine. No charges had been filed yet, but there was talk. "Are you going to press charges, Auntie Lou?" Rachel asked. "Well, I don't want to get those boys in trouble, but they've got to learn that there are consequences to their actions." Luella stood on the porch of her trailer, arms folded, her boot tapping a slow, steady rhythm against the worn plank boards. Her bruises had faded, but the set of her jaw still spoke of the anger she hadn't let herself voice, because there hadn't been time. Now that the dust had settled, and the truth couldn't stay buried. Sheriff Mason's truck was just pulling in as Jack poured everyone steaming hot cups of coffee. As Mason stepped through the screen door, he handed him one without a word. The sheriff took it, nodding his thanks. Gave Luella a long, thoughtful look. "Roy told me what the boys did, and how they locked you up down there?" Luella's mouth tightened, and Jack leaned on the counter. "They thought it was a joke, just a scare." Sheriff Mason snorted. "A joke? Ha! Locking a woman in a condemned mine shaft? Real comedians, these boys." He took a sip of coffee, then looked up at Luella. His eyes were serious now. "I think you ought to press charges. If it were up to me, I'd haul their butts into jail right now, but, well, if you'd rather not put them through that kind of thing, I can offer an alternative." Luella raised a brow at that. "Go on." "I can put the fear of God into them, book 'em for the weekend, let 'em stew in a holding cell, maybe share some space with Earl Bigsby. He still thinks he's in Nam." He took another sip. "Then I'll turn them loose to you with conditions. They work it off, you set the terms." Jack smiled faintly. "You're thinking manual labor?" "I'm thinking that old goat barn of yours collapsed last winter," Mason said, giving her a look. "And those sheds could use some new siding." He glanced around the yard. I think those fence posts have more rot than wood. Luella's eyes narrowed, but not with protest. She was thinking, planning. Fence posts, sheds, goat barn, brush clearing, she said, ticking off on finger. And I want them up at dawn. Every single weekend they work sunup to sundown till I say otherwise. Mason grinned. I knew you'd come around. They build it right, Luella added. I might even feed 'em. Then it's a deal? Mason finished his coffee and set the cup down. I'll let 'em sweat in the cell over the weekend, and then it's back to school probation. None of them boys better miss a day or come in tardy, or they'll have me breathing down their necks. Come next weekend. They're all yours. You want me to tell 'em what they're building? No, Luella said, already turning toward the screen door. I want it to be a surprise. Mason stood, shook Jack's hand, tipped his hat to Sasha and Rachel. Now y'all have a safe trip back to Alaska. The four of them stood on the porch and watched as the sheriff's truck drove off in a cloud of dust. The iron bars clanged shut behind them with a finality that made the boys flinch. The holding cell was small, just one long bench, a flickering overhead light, and the stale smell of old sweat and Lysol. Sheriff Mason didn't say much after booking them, just handed them orange jumpsuits 2 sizes too big and muttered at them, Hope you all like Earl's snoring. Earl Bigsby, a wiry man in a stained denim vest and a wild gray beard, was already dozing in the cell next to the boys. Every few minutes he jerked and he muttered, Charlie's in the trees, before resuming his snoring. Jesse sat with his back against the bars, staring straight ahead, wiping tears away before they could roll down his cheeks. Brian paced. This is stupid. We're not criminals. We didn't mean for any of this. Doesn't matter, Tucker snapped. We did it. Bo, unusually quiet, slumped beside Earl, arms folded. She could have died down there. Nobody spoke for a while. Eventually, Grayson muttered, My mom cried when the sheriff called. I haven't seen her cry since Grandpa died. Brian sank to the floor. They're gonna hate us. Everyone's gonna hate us. They should, Tucker said flatly. It was a stupid thing to do. In the silence that followed, Earl let out a long, gravelly snore and muttered something about helicopters. No one laughed. The cell wasn't cold, but a chill settled in anyway. By dawn, not a one of them had slept more than an hour. It was the longest weekend of their lives. The scent of sagebrush mingled with the fresh morning air. Rachel stood near the porch steps, arms crossed, trying not to cry. Luella didn't make it any easier. Now, don't get all sentimental on me, Luella said, her voice gruff, but her hands fidgeted at her sides. You'll make me start leaking like a busted pipe. Jack smiled, stepping forward to give her a firm hug. Thanks for everything, Lou, for the hospitality, the food, the chaos. Luella snorted, squeezing him once before letting go. Well, you brought most of the chaos. I just stirred it. You sure you're going to be okay with them boys hanging around all summer? I'll keep them sweating till they forgot how to cause trouble, Luella said. Besides that, it's been quiet too long around here. It'll be good for me. Sasha stepped forward, her eyes shimmering. Your family now, she whispered, hugging Luella fiercely, and don't you forget it. I won't, Luella murmured, brushing at her eyes. Rachel, girl, you better write or call. Don't you be a stranger. Rachel gave her one last hug and climbed into the back seat. Jack gripped the wheel, gave Luella one last look, and tipped his fingers in a lazy salute. As they rolled down the gravel road, Luella stayed on the porch, waving until the dust faded and disappeared beyond the rise. As they drove to Reno to catch their plane home, Rachel leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. Next time we take a vacation, can we go somewhere without mines and fires and mountain lions or aliens? Jack grinned. No promises. Jack, Sasha, and Rachel, they left the dusty roads of Nevada behind, bound for home. Back to Alaska. Back to snow-covered peaks, the scent of pine trees, and the mysteries that awaited them in the cold, silent wilderness. The desert had tested them, but Alaska still had secrets of its own. And Jack Moore wasn't done chasing adventure.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode, and I hope you'll join us next week for more of the Wolfman Chronicles. And until then, have a really wonderful week, everyone.